Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to create some envelope pouch cards using the new Not Your Ordinary card collection from Spellbinders and Wendy Vecchi. Now, I absolutely love the uniqueness of this collection. It's got a lot of different add-ons to make some Halloween creations as well as Christmas ones, and then you can do some everyday ones. It's definitely not your ordinary card collection. So there are 4 different die sets in this collection and they mix and match together really well. This Pinking Edge birthday add-ons one I'm going to be using for each and every card. I'm going to be using the Pinking Edge layers for some of the inserts. There's also a Build a Plaid stencil, and this is a really cool stencil because there are 5 different stencil templates, if you will. Each one have different lines of different widths and different spacing apart, and you can use them to create an endless number of stencils. You can use an endless number of color combinations, and it really gives you the freedom to create a plaid exactly how you want, but you can also use it to create a stripe if you wanted. So for my first envelope pouch card, I'm just going to create an everyday one. Now this one would be, it's going to say for you on it, so you could use it to hold a gift card. You could just use it as a thank you gift. I love the fact that this pouch, you could easily put in a gift card in there on one of the inserts, or you can just write a note on there. Now I have all of my pieces here cut out of white cardstock. I have the pieces from the essential envelope, including the envelope, and every envelope today, I just die cut it out of white cardstock, but you could easily change the color. I wanted to have a neutral color palette because as I was going, I wasn't really sure the colors that I was going to use for each one. I wanted to kind of have the freedom to be able to choose when I got to it and see what I felt like doing. So for the first one here, I'm doing the flowers from the essential envelope, and I'm doing several different distress colors. I used mustard for some of the tiny flowers for the centers, as well as hickory smoke for some of them. And then for the flowers themselves, I'm using worn lipstick and abandoned coral. I'm using large Spellbinders ink blending brushes. These are a little bit large to do much detail on those flowers, but I was more interested in getting just some color on there. And then one of the pinking inserts that I'm going to put on the inside of my pouch here, I'm inking around the edges as well. So that's going to coordinate with the florals that I'm going to have on front. So I used both the worn lipstick as well as the abandoned coral. I just did a little bit of light ink blending, and you can see there's color that you can easily write on top of it. It's not going to be too dark for anything. And then for my leaves, I'm using some bundled sage, and then I'm going to use some peeled paint just for a little bit more darkness towards the base of that leaf. Now, even though I used white die cuts for these, you can see I've got some good color on them, but you could also start with colored die cuts and then do your ink blending from there if you wanted your colors to be a bit more vibrant or a little bit more dark. And I'm making sure to wipe off my surface between each and every ink blending to make sure I'm not going to have any ink contamination. Now I wanted to add a little bit of speckles to those flowers, so I'm going to use some fossilized amber distress spritz, and I'm just shaking up the bottle to make sure that that mica is really mixed in, and then taking out the spray mechanism and just tapping it to get some flicks on there. You could also use a paintbrush for this. I typically just use that sprayer end simply because it's already there, it's already covered in whatever spray or medium, or in this case spritz, I'm using, so I might as well just use it to flick off of there. In my opinion, it works pretty much the same as it would if it was a paintbrush end. For my insert, or one of my layers of my insert, I'm going to spray that same fossilized amber distress spritz as well as my yellow flower centers layer. Now I wipe off in between here. If you knew something else that you were wanting this spritz on, I would just wipe it up with that rather than waste it in this way. I was trying to keep my area clean and give some air circulation for that distress spritz to dry. Now, while I'm waiting for all of that to dry, I'm going to take the For and the You stamp from the Christmas add-on set. And both the Christmas as well as the Halloween one have a little stamp set with them that have different sentiments. So it's absolutely perfect to add some customization with some stamps. Before I do any stamping, because this set hasn't been used yet, I like to use a white eraser and just rub on the stamping surface. It removes any manufacturing residue and helps that stamp to take any ink. I don't even test my stamps anymore. I just do this and then make sure that there's no little eraser bits from rubbing on there. Make sure that that's all nice and clean with a soft brush, and then I'm going to use my stamps. Now I'm using it with the Misti stamping tool, and I like this tool because I can easily check with the grid lines on the cover and the clear cover that it's straight. If it's not, I can easily change it. I'm stamping it with some Versamark ink, and then I'm going to emboss it with some gold embossing powder. It's going to tie in with those yellowy gold flicks and sprays from the Fossilized Amber Distress Spritz. So I have some super fine gold embossing powder here. I'm going to tap it on there and tap any excess off. Now, before I did any of this, I did use an embossing powder tool on there just to kind of eliminate that embossing powder sticking on different areas of that cardstock. Just makes it a little bit easier and makes it a little bit more precise. Then I'm going to use my heat tool to melt that embossing powder, and then I can start assembling my envelope pouch. Now I'm using some Sukwang tape here. I have 1/4 inch. It's a little bit narrower, or it's about half the size of the little flap there. You could use a wider one if you want. This is just kind of the one that I've grabbed, and it works perfectly for what I'm using. When I'm assembling these, I'm putting that tab on the inside. Just watched a video from Wendy Vecchi, and she likes to put it on the outside so that when you slide your little insert in, it's not rubbing or bumping on the little edge of the tab on the inside. I didn't find that to be a problem, but if you do find that to be a problem, that's an excellent solution. It's just to use that, or you put the tab from the side on the inside, but the one on the bottom, put it onto the back. It still looks just as nice because you're going to be mainly looking at the front of this pouch anyways, and not really the back, but it's your choice. Putting it on the inside was just my personal preference. With that pouch done, I just did a little bit of ombre ink blending with that bundled sage as well as that peeled paint. Now, before I did anything with this sprayed background, on one of the videos that I did with this, I had someone commenting that theirs rubbed off, and to be honest, I don't ever rub my things that I spray on to see if anything rubs off, so I didn't even know if it did, and I didn't have my cards anymore, so I did rub my fingers on there, and you can see that it does rub off. From what I hear, that means you use too much. If that bothers you, if you used as much as you wanted to and it's rubbing off, you can just use a fixative spray on there. There's several different Krylon ones that I like to use, and you can pick and choose whether you want a gloss medium or a matte, a gloss finish or a matte finish, and then it won't rub off after you do that. You do want to make sure that you do that outside or in a very well ventilated area and let it completely dry before you continue. Now I glued a couple of the pinking layers together and have them set aside to dry. And now I'm gluing my flowers onto the front. Now these flower dies, they actually have two different parts to them. They have an outline part and an inside part. I use them together to create one flower, but you can use them separately with two different colors and create layered flowers where those details that you can see on my flowers here are actually die cut out, and you can see the color layer underneath there. I chose to do it this way. I just wanted something very, very simple, and I thought those details looked nice when they stayed in there. It gives you a little bit more versatility to be able to do it with or without. When it came to the centers of the flowers, I just put a dot of glue in the center and I use a jewel picker to pick them in place. The one thing I forgot to mention is before putting my flowers down, I like to take my fingers and kind of curve the petals, especially on a flower shape like this where it will take that curve. It just gives you a little bit more dimension and a little bit more movement. And at this point, I thought I was done, but I ended up putting a little bit of stickles on the center of the flower, and my brain didn't like the fact that this insert had just a pinked edge to it. It was just me. I didn't like the feel of the jagged edges when I was putting it in and out. So I'm going to cut a piece of cardstock that is 3 1/4 inches by 4 3/4 inches to glue that onto. Now this is just me. If you like that pinked edge and you want to keep it that way, absolutely keep it that way. There's nothing wrong with it. I just didn't like the feel on my hands when I was inserting it and out, putting it in and taking it out. But I've noticed lately there's certain things that have been bothering my hands, so that's probably what it is. So here is, I didn't actually glue the gift card on there because it was one that's used up. I just have it in my craft space if I need a sharp edge or something. But you could use a temporary glue dot or a removable glue dot and glue that down temporarily so it's really easy to remove, and then it's a great way to give a little gift card. For my second card, I'm going to do a Halloween theme here, and I'm taking the spider web background press plate, but I want to foil with it. So I have some faceted silver glimmer foil, and the plate is too small to do the entire piece, so I'm only going to do it on the front, and it's going to be just fine because you're not really going to be looking at the back again anyways. So I cut a piece of foil big enough for that front, and then I'm putting my plate on there, and I am taping it in place because I want to make sure that it covers the front completely. And I really don't want to get a lot of the foiling on the back of it. I put it on my hot glimmer machine, press the timer button, and once that timer button had stopped flashing, take that sandwich out and put it through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine. I'm going to pull it off right away. That plate is very hot. I wash dishes several times a day in very, very hot water, so I can handle that heat, but there is a tool that comes with your glimmer machine to hold that if that is a little bit too hot for you. Just be warned, it is hot. Next, with that foiling done on the front, I'm going to assemble my envelope here. And I did use a Teflon bone folder for all of this when I was doing it to make sure to really press those folds in place. And I pressed them in place before putting my adhesive on. I'm using that same adhesive, that same 1/4 inch Suquang, taking those off. And I wanted to show something here. When I'm putting these together, because I'm putting both flaps on the inside, they kind of interlock at that bottom corner there. It seems like it's not going to work for a second, and then it does totally work. So that's how I put my pieces together. I'm just showing you there that it did split on one of the foiling lines as I was assembling it, but I go and do a little bit of ink blending, and you actually can't see where it split. I was curious if it was going to be visible. It's just something that I noticed as I was putting it together. Now, by putting the little bit of orange ink blending on here, I'm just trying to make those spider webs pop a little bit. And because I used a faceted foil, it has kind of an uneven sparkle that I really, really like with it. You could use any of the silver foils or even a colored or something else if you wanted. I just really liked the look of that faceted foil for this. Now I wanted to create a spider for the web, but I wanted him to have a little bit of extra texture as well. So I have some velvet cardstock here that has some adhesive on the back. I wanted it to have just a little bit more substance to it, so I glued it onto a black cardstock scrap before die cutting it in my Platinum 6 machine. It just makes it a little bit easier to put down. You could just die cut the velvet. It die cuts absolutely beautifully, and then use that adhesive on the back to stick it down, but I wanted it to be just a tiny little bit thicker. If I wanted it thicker still, I could do a couple die cuts of that spider and glue them to the back as well, but just one layer was enough for me. The spider web itself, I die cut from one of the glitter cardstocks in the silver treasured cardstock pack. It's a pack of silver cardstock with 5 different finishes. So there's a mirror finish, a matte finish, a brush finish, the glitter that I'm using here, and then there's also a pearl finish. So it's a great thing for holiday cards because you have a lot of different finishes that you can choose, and it works perfectly. Now I messed up with my taping here, and I didn't tape that stamping. I just used my Misti stamping tool. All of the black sentiments were stamped with black memento ink, and then the gray ones were stamped with hickory smoke, just to create a little bit of a different background. And that foiled edge, or the foiled spider web, resisted the ink, so the stamping looks like it's behind the web. For my third card, I'm using the candy corn shape from the Halloween add-ons, and I'm creating little trees. Now, this is not my idea, and I'm not claiming this idea in any way, shape, or form. Wendy Vecchi had a video, I think it was on Facebook. I saw a video that she had posted somewhere, and it was one of the ideas that she had for the candy corn shape. She created a bunch of really cool things with it, one of them being the trees. She had them as individual trees and did them out of a variety of green shades. And what I thought I would do is take that idea, use all the same shades, but I'm going to stack them on top of each other, just make taller trees with it. She also used it to create some Christmas lights, as well as a carrot and a couple other things that are escaping my mind right now. But if you can find it, I think it might have been on her Facebook page. It's a really interesting one, and she's been doing several different videos with this collection, just giving you many, many different ideas of how to use it, and they're fabulous. So I'm just taking these candy corn pieces, and there are 3 different sizes. So the smallest one is at the bottom, the medium-sized one is in the middle, and then largest one at the bottom, medium-sized one in the middle, and smallest one at the top. I'm going to do 2 trees with 3 layers to it. Then I'm going to do 1 tree with 2 layers using the medium size and the small size, leaving one of the large ones. That way I have a different variety of layered trees for the front of my envelope pouch. Once again, I have another white base here, and you could easily swap this out with a colored base if you want. But for a little bit of difference, I'm going to use that Build a Plaid stencil and use that for my envelope. Now, this plaid stencil is 6 inches, but because the stripes don't go all the way to the end, I want to say they're probably about 5.5 inches. They don't reach all the way across this, so I'm just doing this plaid on the front. And in order to get a nice precise line on the fold, I just use a piece of scrap paper just to cover that. By doing this on my Altenew sticky mat, it makes it really easy to do that. That mat just grabs things so they stay in place and I don't have to worry about that sheet of paper moving on me. If you don't have a sticky mat, you could also use some painter's tape or best ever craft tape. That would work as well. So I'm using different widths of stripes from the Build a Plaid stencil set, and I'm going to build a plaid. The first color here, I believe, was peeled paint. I wasn't paying attention to see which color I used first, but I'm not necessarily making a dark plaid here because I want to put the trees in front of it. I want to have that pattern, but I don't want the colors to be too bright and overtake everything. So I'm trying to be a little bit lighter so you see that color, but it's not bright, bold color. You could easily change it and make bright, bold color if you want, but that's not the look that I was going for here. For the next layer, I'm using the 2 stripes that go on the other side or either side of the first one that I used, and I'm using some lumberjack plaid, a nice bright or nice beautiful red, perfect for the holidays. I love this for a holiday red color. And I'm not making my stripes the same going vertically than I did horizontally. I want there to be some variety here, and because these stencils are separate, because you can place them where you want, you have that control over it. Now, after doing the red and the green, I wanted just a little bit of gold, but I didn't want to use any gold ink. I didn't want that to overpower anything. So all I'm doing is taking one of the stencils, placing it where I want the gold line to go, and then I'm just using a gold gel pen. The hardest part of these stencils is making sure that your lines are straight, because once your lines are down or you've got your ink down, they are where they are. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one as I did for the other ones. I'm not necessarily making my horizontal stripes and vertical stripes exactly the same, just to add a little bit of interest. Using the pen makes it very, very easy, and you can put those stripes exactly where you want them to go. And because I use just a fine stripe, you get that metallic tone to it, but again, it doesn't overtake anything. And I love the fact that you have the freedom to do that. Now, after doing that, I realized that I wanted to splatter the background with some of that fossilized amber distress spritz. Again, I didn't want it on the back, so I just placed that piece of printer paper right over that edge again and just splattered some on the back. Because I'm using these trees in front of it, I kind of wanted it to look ish like a starry background. Obviously, it's not really going to be looking like a starry background because I have a plaid background there to it, but I just thought it would give a little bit of variety to it. For the inside of my card here, I'm just going to stamp Merry Christmas, and I'm going to use that lumberjack plaid red again. Now, I had just re-inked my stamp, so it's very, very juicy. I don't need to stamp it multiple times, but there was one area that just didn't want to take it right in the center at the bottom, so I did have to stamp that again, but I didn't add any ink to the rest of it simply because I didn't want it to start blending or bleeding or just over stamp it basically. So with that stamped, I can set that aside. Well, I'm going to glue it onto the piece that I made for it to sit on, and then I'm going to set that aside. I just grabbed a piece of crimson cardstock here. It matches that ink color beautifully. And once again, the size of the rectangle that I made was 3 1/4 by 4 3/4. And I just cut that down with my guillotine trimmer. You could use a rectangle die if you find the right size one. I figured it was easier to just cut it with the guillotine trimmer than to go through my rectangle dies to see if I had a similar sized one or a correct size one. So once again, I'm using that Sukwang tape to glue my envelope pouch together. I love this tape because it sticks really well and I don't have to worry about it falling apart. I've been using it for years and I've never had the tape dry out and it fall apart. I have projects, or I've seen projects that I created 10-15 years ago. They've never yellowed. The tape doesn't dry, and there are projects where I put something on top of the tape to cover it, so it's something that you'd be able to see if it yellowed, and you'd be able to tell if it dried up because the pieces would have fallen off. For the trunks of my trees, I took one of the gold pieces of cardstock from the Treasured Gold cardstock pack, and I just cut 1/8 of an inch strip to make those trunks. You can make it as wide or as narrow as you wanted. I wanted to tie in the gold flecks that we have in the back, as well as the gold stripes that we made, or I made with the gel pen. And you can use any of the finishes. I chose the brushed one because I didn't want the stems or the trunks to kind of overwhelm anything. I also have a star cut for one of the trees, and the star comes from the Halloween add-on die set, and I wanted it to match that as well, and that one was done out of the brushed or the matte finish as well. The brushed and the matte look very, very similar. The only difference is the brushed one has kind of very faint kind of brush strokes on them, so there's a directional line on it. But other than that, they look very similar. So here is the star that I die cut, and I'm just going to put it on top of one of the shorter trees. If I put it on top of one of the taller ones, they would kind of go over the edge. So just to add a little tiny bit more sparkle, I'm taking some platinum stickles and just doing some dots on the trees to kind of look like ornaments. You could also do just like iridescent stickles as well if you didn't want to show the color. Again, I'm doing the color so that it ties in with the other golds, as well as the fact that it's going to add that little bit of sparkle. I'm making those drops really, really tiny though, so they're not large and overwhelming. Now, when I was doing this, a couple of mine, because I was doing it fast, a couple of them kind of got little trails between two of them. Very easy to clean up, especially when it's wet. You just take a dye pick and just kind of scrape that off, and it removes any of that glitter glue between those areas. Now for my fourth one, I'm creating another Christmas themed one, and I'm using the Christmas add-on set. I used the Ticket die set to die cut out of crimson cardstock, and I just used my trimmer to make it a rectangle. In reality, you could just take your trimmer and create a rectangle. I just chose to use the die to begin with, just for something a little bit different. And then I have some holly here cut out of fern cardstock, and I'm using the stamp the stamp set from the Merry Christmas add-ons for the center of that. This stamp was used to add detail to the trees in my last one, but it's really meant to be detail for that holly, and it absolutely works perfectly. Then I am stamping my Merry Christmas onto a piece of white scrap cardstock, and all of the stamping could be done with your Misti, but I just had those acrylic blocks sitting out, and it works a lot easier, especially for the holly, to just have it on an acrylic block, and then you can position it properly. If I was doing a ton of these, I would probably do it in my Misti and make it a little bit more streamlined, but because I only had 3 holly and I was just doing 1 Merry Christmas, it's easy enough to just do it with an acrylic block. Then I used the coordinating die to die cut that out, set that aside. Adding just a tiny little bit of ink blending to the base of the holly in that peeled paint, and the stamping for that one was also done out of the peeled paint as well. I wanted to make sure that those details were able to be visible. Then I have the berries for the holly, and that was die cut out of a scrap of crimson cardstock as well. But I wanted to give them a different texture, so I'm adding some glossy accents to them to give them some nice shine and dimension, and then I'm going to let that completely dry. For the bow for my gift, and that's what I'm making as a Christmas gift, I used one of the gold cardstocks from the Treasured Gold cardstock pack. There are actually 3 different dies to create that bow. I just used the 2 of them. The third one is another layer to go over the knot. To be honest, I didn't even realize there was a 3rd layer till after I had it all together, but I don't think I really miss it. It's one of those things that would have been easy to die cut and add to it if it felt like it was missing something, but with everything else, I just didn't feel like it was really missing anything. So I'm going to put my gift on the bottom left side of my envelope pouch here. And just like those petals from that first flower, I like to curve my greenery and my holly. So I'm just using my fingers to do that. And I kind of create a little bit of a S curve. The bottom part of it, the space of the stem is going to be a little bit flat, so it gives me an area to glue down, and then I don't glue down the rest of it. It just adds a little bit of dimension. You could glue down the tip of the holly if you wanted it to have or wanted it to be completely secure. I personally don't bother. I don't feel like it makes a huge difference, but if you feel better about it, you can absolutely do that. Next, I'm gluing down those berries, and I had glued down my bow and then lifted it up to put those berries down and figured I might as well just take it completely off and then add it again. And I put my bow on a little bit of a cockeyed edge there. You could put it totally straight if you prefer that. I just thought with that holly there, it looked a little bit nicer if it was just a little bit to the side. For my insert here, I cut that rectangle piece that is 3 1/4 inches by 4 3/4 out of the same gold cardstock that I used for my bow, just for a little bit of added shine. And it's very, very simple, but again, it would be perfect to add a little gift card. You could just write a note there, put a little gift certificate. For that Halloween one there, I put in a little treat. You could even put in, say, a full-size candy bar that's a little bit flatter if you wanted. It's just a great way to give a little gift, to give a little card that's a little bit different, and it gives you many opportunities for different ways to use it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time you spend with me, and I hope you have a fantastic day.